being prejudiced and negative towards the other person's opinion. Finally, volume also plays a role which spirals in the situations mentioned and distracts more and more from the actual topic. As you can see, it doesn't take much to lay the foundation for an argument. The topic can be anything from preferences to the sports team, to politics and business, to salary negotiations at work. You can apply what you have learned here universally to any topic. The first thing to note is that the origin of conflicts usually lies in one's own subjectivity, which prevents one from taking a sober view of the situation. The more heated the dispute, the less rational the players are. This creates a vicious circle that can lead to great potential for conflict in all kinds of conversations. As soon as the focus is less on the actual subject matter and more on the person behind it, an argument is almost inevitable. In everyday life, you will be able to recognize this pattern in discussions about your favorite sports team, or the like, for example, because people are already subjective at the beginning of the conversation due to sympathies. In professional life, this can be seen, for example, in critical discussions with superiors. When confronted with your own shortcomings, we tend to automatically adopt a defensive stance, become less receptive, and reject any criticism even if it is justified. This not only prevents a healthy culture of discussion, but also a good opportunity to reflect and possibly even eradicate mistakes. However, this guide does not necessarily help you to avoid conflict, even if the methods developed here can certainly be similarly helpful in this area. This guide will show you how it is possible to resolve a conflict that has already arisen without any losses. So you are in an intense discussion, have been arguing with your work colleague for weeks, or simply cannot convince your boss to give you a pay raise. Things have already been said that have affected the other person personally, and you have already invested so much in persuading the other person that you no longer want to back down. The sides are deadlocked. This is the crux of the problem. How do I resolve a situation like this? You don't want to lose face, and ideally you also want the result you're hoping for. But your counterpart is pursuing the same goal. Pride, subjectivity, frustration, and antipathy on the part of the participants have exactly the opposite effect. If it continues like this, the conflict escalates and both lose more than was originally at stake. A situation from which both can benefit, such as a conversation to pass the time, quickly becomes one from which both suffer. Comparisons can be drawn here with a game of poker. You have to weigh up whether to give up your bet and lose, but still hold on to your remaining chips, or whether to go all in and then win or lose everything. The parallels end there, however, because it is not at all helpful to approach human interaction like a game of cards and tricks. However, the poker comparison makes the tricky situation clear. So how can this conflict be resolved? Concepts for problem solving. To answer this guide will first approach the situation from an abstract perspective and explain the theories and methods to you before applying them concretely and vividly in real life, just as you will be able to do after listening to this book. But first, back to the problems that need to be overcome. There is a conflict of interest between both parties. There is emotionality at play, which prevents an objective view of the situation and causes the situation to only get worse. On the other side are the goals. What is your desired end result of the conflict? You most likely want to get along with your disputing partner, but often also want to get what you started arguing about in the first place. Whether it's a pay raise, a favor, or something else, in disputes you are more interested in not looking stupid and being in the right, possibly also in convincing the other person. In order to reconcile these interests, harmony and profit for you, there is a solution that is often considered utopian, the win-win situation. Both parties come out of the conflict as winners. In the course of this book, however, you will discover that this is possible more often than you might initially think. The Harvard concept. The so-called Harvard concept is also based on this idea. This is an internationally proven method of conflict resolution that is primarily used in legal disputes to avoid a dispute in court. It was developed by Roger Fisher and William Ury in 1981, who took inspiration from the Harvard Negotiation Project at Harvard University, hence the name. It is based on simple solutions that can be applied regardless of the dispute in a professional context and attempts to ensure that the disputing parties can both benefit from the dispute in 5 steps. First of all, the structure of this method should be explained, and you will already notice that the problems and causes of conflict that were previously worked out are reflected and that these are specifically counteracted.